right, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our very first statewide Mobility Mentoring Lead webinar. We are really excited to have all of our pilot participants and all of our newly trained Mobility Mentoring Leads join us today in this webinar. So most of you have met or know me. I'm Carrie Beamer. I'm an Innovation and Training Specialist with the Department of Early Learning, and I'm the lead for Mobility Mentoring in the state of Washington. I'm also joined here today by my supervisor, and I saw that she was on the call, so I'm hoping she comes back. That's Karen Gans. She is the Innovation Training and CQI Manager here at Dell. And in the background, helping us with the technical piece of the webinar is Kelly DeBoer, who is also an Innovation and Training Specialist. And I have staff on the line. And I have staff on the line from Empath, and I'll be introducing them just momentarily. But I just wanted to do a little housekeeping for you all. You all are on mute. There is a questions box that you can see about halfway down your screen, and there are, if you go to the box up at the top and you expand the box, then about halfway down you're going to see the question box. Most of you are familiar with the way we do our webinars here at Dell. So any questions, feel free to type them into the question box. Because of time today, if we don't get to questions, just know that we have created that frequently asked questions document, and it is a living document, and what we don't get answered today, we will most definitely make sure that it gets on that document, and then I will post it to Basecamp. So today I just want to give you an idea of what we are going to be talking about. We are so pleased to have Elizabeth Babcock, who is the Empath President and CEO of Empath, here today to give us a national perspective on poverty. And then Angelo and Emerald are here. You all will remember Angelo from training. He was one of our trainers here that were here in March, I believe. March? Yes. And Angelo and Emerald are going to talk about some successful implementation keys to success that they've seen with others around the state. I'm going to do a little talking about training. A lot of you have talked about crosswalking the PFCE framework and Head Start and how it works with the bridge. So we're going to talk about that and show you some documents we created. A little bit on our data system in ELMS, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for questions. So right now it is my pleasure today to introduce Elizabeth Babcock, and we're just so happy and pleased that you could join us today and just sort of ground ourselves in this work is not just happening in Washington State, but on a national and international perspective. And so I just thank you so much for joining us today on our webinar.
Oh my gosh, it's wonderful to be with you and wonderful to be with all of the mobility mentoring leads in Washington State. You guys are at the forefront of this work. It's very exciting. So thank you, Carrie, and thank you very much, Karen and Kelly and everyone in Washington State. Can you help me, Carrie, and let me know, am I supposed to be covering about how much time today?
You have about 15 to 20 minutes.
Great. And my team thought maybe it would be good if I left a couple of minutes for questions before my section is done, since I won't be here at the end.
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
And you just tell me when you want me to advance the slides.
Okay. Well, why don't we advance them right now? Well, I want to start by thanking all of you who've been doing mobility mentoring in Washington State, because you are part of a very, very large network of organizations that are doing this kind of wonderful transformational work. And the contributions that you've made already to this work and what we're learning are huge. You know, Karen and Kerry and the other leaders within Washington State have really been helping us learn and advance how we do this work ourselves. And in particular, I want to thank all of you for the amazing outcomes that you've been achieving. They've been really inspiring. I'm going to talk a little bit more about who they've inspired, but you know, the great outcomes that you've been getting with parents in early Head Start, 17 areas of adult development, and with great outcomes in all of them, and the wonderful impacts that they're starting to have on children. It's very exciting to all of us and very, very motivating. You are doing this work as part of a network that is now all over the United States and actually in other parts of the world as well. And what it is a big network of organizations like yours, like mine, that are really interested in trying to strengthen the way that we work with adults and children who are living in poverty and want to get ahead and want to help themselves get ahead and become economically independent. And this work is being done in a way that is really shaking up how we think of human services, where all of us together are proving that when individuals are given the chance to set their own goals and to assess themselves and to decide what it is they want to work on and are motivated to start working on those goals, that they achieve amazing things and great outcomes happen. You know, it's a real shift from thinking of the world of human services as being a case management kind of world to thinking of it as a world where we partner with the participants to help them find and unfold in themselves the things that they want to do so that they can achieve what it is they're trying to accomplish for themselves and their families. And this has been a big, big change, but one that is really happening at a pretty rapid clip. So as you can see from this map, the Mobility Mentoring Economic Mobility Exchange Network is now a network of over 80 organizations, about 85 actually, I think right now, in the United States, across the United States, and also in 4 other countries. Just as an aside, the Netherlands, the Holland or the Netherlands, the federal government actually supported the adoption of mobility mentoring as the coaching platform for cities across the Netherlands. And we now have 11 cities with about 25 more in the pipeline that are bringing up mobility mentoring in as their main coaching platform in that country alone. But in the U.S., we have wonderful, wonderful partners all across, ranging from the New York City Department of Child Preventive Services, their Department of Health and Human Services Prevention Services, to homeless shelters in Detroit, to entire community college systems, just all across the United States, a variety of different organizations implementing mobility mentoring. Last year, we had 55 organizations, and those 55 organizations were serving, I know you're going to think I'm crazy when I say this, but 1.9 million people. And of those people, they were starting to reach 48,000 using mobility mentoring tools. So the mobility mentoring approach was already being used by 48,000 participants last year. We expect when we collect the numbers again this year, we're in that collection phase right now and into the summer, that we will find that 100,000 people have been served by mobility mentoring tools. And the work is growing very, very rapidly. We currently have a contract with the federal government to be working with 8 different states that are looking to convert their TANF welfare to work systems from previously a case management kind of system to a system of mobility mentoring informed coaching. And other states outside of that contract are doing that kind of conversion as well. So again, I know you're going to think it's crazy to say this, but we really expect within the next 3 to 5 years that we're going to have over 1 million people being reached by mobility mentoring services in the United States and beyond. But it's not the numbers that excite us the most. What excites us is the kind of work that we've been able to do with all of you, where you're teaching us how to strengthen this coaching work with low-income families, and where the outcomes that you're achieving are inspiring other organizations, other states, to really want to do this work in a stronger way and achieve those kind of outcomes themselves. So this is a network that is a real living, breathing thing that is helping us all learn together, strengthen what we do, and over time achieve more and more opportunities for families of all different kinds, whether it be families in Native American populations or inner city Detroit or in Mass General Hospital here in Massachusetts. We're learning it from all of these different settings and from all of these organizations. Okay, if you'd advance it, that'd be much appreciated. So there's so much going on, it's kind of hard for me to be able to tell you where to begin. But the first I want to tell you is that I had the privilege of working for 2 years with the Gates Foundation advisory group called the U.S. Partnership on Mobility from Poverty. And this was a group that Bill and Melinda formed of 24 experts to try to help them think about how they could potentially move the needle on poverty in the United States. And we came together for 2 years to kind of study what we thought would really help with economic mobility, and just concluded our work. We're actually wrapping it up right now, and had a big national meeting just about a month ago where the Gates Foundation announced that they were going to be making a new $158 million beginning initiative, funded initiative, to take up some of the things that have been recommended by the partnership and begin to start funding some of those strategies. This is just a beginning for Bill and Melinda Gates, and actually many of their partners in venture philanthropy are also stepping up to the plate to start funding these new strategies. And what they basically said was they are going to be making their awards in 2 basic areas. The first is in using big data, public data systems. You know the kinds of data that we've been seeing about places and cities that create more opportunity for families than perhaps other places and cities, and that just by moving from one end of a city to another, you give your children and yourself a better chance to get ahead, and lots of other data about the nature of how our systems trap people in poverty. So the first initiative is that they're funding with their money is to invest more in those kinds of data-driven strategies. But the second one was really informed by all of you and the work that we're doing together, which is to make investments in capacity building, in training that is based in evidence on what works, and networks that are banding together to learn from each other. It was very exciting to me to hear that these couple of years that we've invested, that they really heard us. And if you want to know more about the kind of strategies that they were learning about in this work, I did write a paper for the U.S. partnership that they ended up publishing. It's called Using Brain Science to Transform Human Services and Increase Personal Mobility from Poverty. And that public paper is available, and it talks about all the levels of brain science informed work, from the way we design our environments and the way we think about how we design our forms and processes, all the way up to and including the kind of mobility mentoring work that you and DEL is doing in such an amazing way. You'll see your own data in that paper, and I thank you for giving me the data that I could put in there. So that's very exciting to us because we see funders like Gates and others, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and many others, starting to put their money behind doing the kind of work that you're in the middle of doing, which is converting from these kind of very directive kind of programs, basically giving people information, to getting to the point that the coaching processes are starting and people are starting to direct themselves. So that's very, very exciting. We also have a bunch of new work that is going to be coming out and is soon to be released about a very important new aspect of coaching. and that is what we think of as expectations or high expectations, and the impact that expectations can have on what happens with your participants. I'll give you the punchline right away, and that is that, did you know that just the way that you feel and think about your own participants, the expectations that you have for them, your sense of whether or not they will succeed or fail at something, actually has an enormous impact on participant outcomes. The science basically tells us that, for example, in a classroom, just what a teacher believes in their student is more powerful in predicting how that student will do in class than is their race or income or class size. So this is important new research that we are trying to bring to bear on the coaching process. But what the research also says is, and we know this from our own work, that when you sit face to face with a participant and you know the struggles that they have and the complexity in their lives, it is very, very hard for frontline workers to really believe that their participants are going to be successful at achieving big goals, like moving out of poverty or getting a better education. And we know what they have to face in doing that, and when we are in that room face to face with them, it's very hard for us to say, I know for sure that you can do this. It's normal and natural for frontline workers to have these struggles. It's normal and natural for supervisors to have this kind of concerns about the success of their participants and staff. But we also now know important things that we as leaders and organization leaders and as managers, things we can do to make it possible for our frontline staff and for participants to achieve high expectations that we dream for them. And these new ways of working are something that I have written a paper about based on a lot of research and with a lot of academic collaborators. That paper, which is called Harnessing Expectations or High Expectations for Participants, is a paper that is going to be released on June the 19th, but I'm going to be doing a webinar on it, giving all the inside details for the exchange on June the 13th from 3 to 4, and all of you can participate and join us in that if you want to get a heads up about this new evidence that we can use to improve our coaching. And then last but not least, we have coming up in the fall a national conference that is a Disrupting Poverty conference that we hold once every 2 years. We hope that some of you will be able to come and join us. And man, the lineup of people that we've got coming to that thing are just amazing. We have Chuck Collins, who is a really famous author, Born on Third Base. He's got a new book coming out who really talks about how it is that we can help people get ahead and the critical aspects of how we can build programs and services to help them. We have Ben Zander, the author of The Art of Possibility. He's an amazing, charismatic conductor. He's had 900, I think, million views on his TED Talk, one of the most viewed TED Talks ever. And he is coming to actually coach all of us and also to coach some musicians right in front of us. We have the former provost of Columbia University, Claude Steele, a very famous professor on bias and stereotypes, the author of Whistling Vivaldi. He's coming with us, and that's just a few of the folks who have already committed to coming to our conference this fall. You can come meet them and learn from them, and I think it's going to be very powerful. And we also will be having an exchange convening just for exchange members for a day before the conference starts. The conference is on November 1st and 2nd, and the exchange meeting will be on October 31st. And just one other exciting thing to tell you that isn't on the slide, and that is we have just received funding, a very sizable chunk of funding, to start building this coming year an online learning platform that we hope will allow for there to be training resources in mobility mentoring so that frontline workers who miss the trainings when you're doing train the trainer, who are newly employed or folks who want to brush up, will be able to go online and have a whole online classroom that's built just for frontline workers, ultimately for managers and supervisors as well, being built this coming year. We're just starting this work, so we don't know exactly when the first access to the online classroom will be, but we're hopeful that it will be within this coming fiscal year, which starts July the 1st and ends June 30th of 2019. Sometime toward the latter part of the spring of 2019, we hope that we'll begin to have this online classroom for you and for your staff to access resources that can help you as you're training and learning and improving this work with us. So those are some of the things that are going on. I just want to tell you, you in the Department of Early Learning, all of you, Karen, as your very inspiring and, as we say in Boston, wicked smart leader, you have really been just inspiring all of us, and we've been learning so much from you, and we're grateful for your partnership and looking forward to what we do over the next couple of years together. So I'm going to wrap up with that and see if you have any questions for me for the next couple of minutes, and if not, we'll turn it over to my colleagues.
This is Carrie. I know one of the questions that folks are probably wondering is the webinar in June. How do they sign up? And just know that as a follow-up to this webinar today, I will make sure you guys all get access to that, because it sounds very exciting, like super exciting to hear what you have to say about that.
I'm actually starting to shape up a TED Talk on this, and I'm calling it the coaching superpower. It's the tractor beam of high expectations, that just by how you look and you talk to people and the kind of goals that you help them set, you can get them 30% higher, faster, further, and it really doesn't cost a thing. So
right.
hope that we'll be able to learn about this together.
One of the questions that we did get in was from Ethna. She's just wondering, who was the name of the person that you mentioned that had the TED Talk that was seen like 9 million times?
Benjamin Zander, Z-A-N-D-E-R. It's one of the most viewed TED Talks ever on the art of possibility. He's a conductor and music leader, but what he talks about is how the art of possibility, how just coaching musicians, because he works with young musicians, how your attitudes toward them and your beliefs in them can help them completely open up and unfold. And he is an amazingly charismatic speaker. It's Z as in zebra, A-N-D-E-R.
Great, thank you so much. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in, and I know how valuable your time is, and we really just cannot thank you enough for sort of kicking us off and giving us this perspective of the work that we're doing here in the state. It's really fantastic. And I do see that Karen's on the line, so I don't know if you wanted to add anything or say anything before Elizabeth has to jump off the call. If she might be just dialing in.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Karen, is that you?
Yes, it is. Hi there. I'm so sorry. I'm in a hallway at a conference, and I'm having connectivity issues, so I really apologize for not being able to get on the call sooner. I was able to hear everything that you shared and talked about, and just want to say thanks, and that I'm planning, and Carrie is planning on coming out to the Disrupting Poverty Conference in October, so we really look forward to seeing you then.
Oh, I always like being around you guys. You're like a real shot of adrenaline and mojo to us. So I'm really glad you're coming.
Great.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for letting me join you. And I think you're off to a great start with these webinars. So I hope that the rest of the webinar goes well. And it's been a pleasure being with you.
Thank you so much. Great. Well, that was very inspiring. And Karen, I'm glad you have your connectivity issues fixed, because the next little slide, I was hoping that you would just give a brief overview of the Racial Equity Work Group and the call out to get folks to help us in this work.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to be able to let everyone know that in the work that we did in the pilot around looking at, how we wanted the bridge, our mobility mentoring bridge in Washington for ECAP to be, we had a lot of different versions that we created over time with lots of input from family support staff and mobility mentoring leads who participated in the pilot. And, we're such a great group of deep thinkers. There are, of course, additional ideas that people have come up with now that we have the whole state trained. And I wanted to let everyone know that as a result of some of the feedback that we received, that we are going to be convening an equity group around the implementation of mobility mentoring, and specifically around some of the documentation. And we have a number of people who've already let us know that they're interested in participating. So if you are interested in participating in this, just email Terry or me and let us know, and we'll be sure to include you in that. We're believing that this work is going to begin in August, and we'll meet regularly. I don't think we'll probably be able to meet monthly, but we'll meet regularly throughout the coming school year to gather information. We're going to be partnering with staff from MPAS on this, in this work group, so that we can pull together information so that, we have their national and even international perspective, as well as the perspectives from all of you here in Washington State. So we look forward to hearing from you, and if you're unable to participate, know that we will provide updates to you on a regular basis around the information that we're coming up with and what we've been able to develop.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you so much. So it's my privilege to also introduce Angelo. And again, you might remember him from your training in the Mobility Mentoring Essentials training. And Emerald are here today to really talk to us about some tips and strategies that they have worked with agencies across the nation, and some of the things that they were successful in doing. So welcome, Angelo and Emerald.
Hi, thank you so much, Terry. So I'm Angelo Lima, and hopefully y'all remember me. And I'm here with Emerald Cronin today. I'll let you.
Yes, hi, pilot participants and mobility mentoring leads. I think I've had the privilege of presenting on a couple webinars before with you, and so we're excited to be here today just to talk and touch base on implementation.
Yeah, so here at MPAS, we've fully implemented mobility mentoring throughout all of our programming. And as a part of the exchange, Emerald and I have assisted in supporting organizations both in and outside of the U.S. as they implement mobility mentoring informed models into their own work. So here are a few bits. These are some best practices that we've picked up along the way, or we learned along the way. And we're going to speak about implementation, or about a few different aspects of implementation. We're going to talk about it in the context of the physical workspace or the work environment. We're going to talk about it as how to best support staff, and also in how to streamline and simplify tools. So I'm going to hand it over to Emerald, who's going to be doing a little bit of walking us through this.
Yes, thank you, Angelo. As Angelo mentioned, we do a lot of work here, obviously with implementation of a mobility mentoring model, but also supporting our exchange member organizations as they are implementing. So we're learning kind of in this two-prong approach, which has been really exciting. And a few key takeaways just from that as you're thinking about this first implementation phase is really paying attention to how conducive your environment is to coaching. So as you went through the training, the coaching section of that, thinking about creating a space for coaching. So what it might look like to establish or strengthen this environment. Coaching is our approach to the work here at Empath. It sets the foundation for our interactions with families. It's that partnership, collaborative by nature, and designed to support those one-on-one interactions that bolster executive functioning or that goal-directed behavior. And so research has actually shown that executive functioning skills are developed and strengthened in these safe, calm spaces where individuals are able to practice and engage in executive functioning. So the idea is that as often as we can, we create these spaces when working with participants, when possible, right? So the first goal would be to minimize distractions. So we think about this. Examples include potentially getting creative about where and when you meet. So if the office is really busy during a certain time of day and it's an option, meeting earlier in the morning or later in the evening. If you're doing home visits specifically, providing coloring books or child-safe widgets for children to play with as you're meeting with parents. And even bonus, if these toys or coloring can be kind of linked to maybe the work you're doing with a parent, so it's kind of incorporating that 2-gen approach, so maybe coloring a piggy bank or something like that, or some ideas that our mentors here have engaged in. And then also that idea of self-regulation or co-regulation, working together to engage in that with, so kicking off meetings with breathing or mindfulness or a way to really set the tone in that one-on-one interaction I mentioned. Another way that we think about here, which is not always possible in our programs, but is creating a more calming environment. And a way to do that, so considering things like lighting, so harsh lighting can sometimes be remind participants of hospitals or like big government buildings, sometimes that harsh lighting. So thinking about that, are lamps an option? Maybe artwork on the wall, specifically, is it motivational? Is it inclusive? Here at Empath, we definitely have the bridge lots of places as a way to really like incorporate that into our programming. Are there plants? So is there some greenery you can add to the space, or calming music? So anything that can bring life or energy to a space that might traditionally not feel maybe that calming. Also, is the space accessible to people, and are there materials available in multiple languages? So thinking about creating, again, like that safe space so that the one-on-one interactions and the coaching approach can really be implemented there. The last key takeaway regarding the creation of a coaching environment includes creating space for a meeting that is confidential and private. Again, I know this can be a challenge in programming, but many of the conversations we have with families address heavy and oftentimes personal topics. So ideas for creating a more private space that we have here include something being creative about, again, where you're meeting, so meeting outside is an option, if that's an option. And then we use a lot of white noise machines here that have really been, I think, key in kind of creating a more private space. And then the last thing I will say about creating a coaching environment touches on recognition of the hard work that the participants and the families that we serve are engaging in, and thinking of ways to recognize that and building it into your actual environment. So here at Empath and in other exchange member programs, we've been really intentional about this. So creating like goal achievement boards, recognition for goals set and achieved at community meetings that are held, shout outs and community newsletters that go out to families and to staff, just as ways to engage families while creating that coaching environment. The next tip that we kind of learned with implementation has to do with training and support for staff. So here at Empath, we have what's called a coaching culture. Staff coach families and participants, and then staff are coached by their supervisors as well. So here we started doing what we call a 10-minute check-in as a way to really like kick off supervision and coaching in a coaching way. So thinking about in those first 10 minutes, our goals that we set as professionals, working with our supervisors on how we can achieve those, what steps need to be taken. So really engaging in that. So one, that's a way for, again, coaching as a parallel process, then also practicing what coaching looks like as a modeling, so that as we then go out, or as our mentors go out into the field and do the work, there's space for that. Also having regular staff trainings on the model. We actually have a designated staff member here who engages in that. She shadows our mentors on the ground and then provides feedback, a feedback loop to help support the skill building with mobility mentoring. We've also had monthly meetings, practitioner meetings that go into different topics around the bridge and goal setting. We've had work groups around motivational interviewing. It's really building in the practice because like the way we think about it here, coaching, someone probably doesn't just walk onto the job day one and they're an amazing coach, right? Coaching comes from skill building and practice, and that's something that encouraging that space for practice is really important. And then also, another piece of that is hearing from staff what's working and what can be improved. So having mechanisms in place for this. So here we do a staff survey. We built out a participant survey to launch. Thinking about reflective supervision. So what's working in the model, what's not, what's challenging, what's coming up for us. Things like that, really building that into the programming. And then the last piece, and I cannot stress this enough, is promoting self-care in this line of work. And not just that, but making it a part of the organizational culture. So here at Empath, we actually applied for and received a grant for a wellness committee, which we then implemented and have built into our culture as trying to pay attention to the how we can provide services around mental and physical well-being for our staff. But thinking about ways to do that not only are we having those conversations one-on-one and supervision and with each other, with colleagues, but also bringing that into the organization as a whole. And then the last item I want to cover surrounding implementation is the importance of streamlining and simplifying tools across your programming. So it can be really frustrating for staff and parents if information gathering and/or paperwork, it feels repetitive or duplicative, so asking the same questions over and over again. Oftentimes those questions are intrusive. So being sure that tools and paperwork are streamlined and integrated wherever possible. So it can be helpful for staff to know what data needs to be collected, how it's being collected, and then why. So what is the data being used for? Because this can also help staff communicate more openly with participants or families who may have a general distrust of standard assessments for good reason. And so having staff who are prepared to answer questions around, why do you want to know this? And then engaging in a conversation around that, I think, can be really powerful. Because having more honest conversations about the data and how it's collected, I think, helps establish trust and rapport. And it also helps provide families with insight on programming and what the mentor or coach or family support specialist, what their role is. So I think that's really important too, as you're thinking about program outcomes and what that looks like, and how you're engaging your families in that. It can also be helpful to think about how the data, how that data needs to be collected for the government or funding source can be integrated into the bridge assessment as a way to make the process, I feel like, less transactional and more collaborative and open-ended in nature. And so we've worked to do this at Empath in our database, in our programs, and so many of the data points that we are required to collect, they naturally come up in the bridge assessment. So thinking about a way to really integrate those two. And then we also have exchange members who have done similar work in thinking about the Head Start assessment, which has a lot of questions, and thinking about that, how it can be integrated into the bridge conversation or assessment so that it's really not, again, you're not duplicating those efforts. You're making it a little more collaborative and open-ended, and I think that creates a safer space. So back to that coaching piece of it. I want to do a plug. We had a webinar done last month by one of our local members, Horizons for Homeless Children. On the portal, they did a whole webinar on implementation. So on their planning phases, or their planning phase, their implementation, their lessons learned, their successes, and I think it was a really deep dive into what that looked like. And I'm hoping to continue doing that series because I think it'll be really helpful for members. So I encourage you to tune into the portal. It's on there. If you don't have access to the portal, please email us at theexchange@empathways.org, and we can get you set up so you have access to that. And I also want to go back to the question just about how you register for next month's or June's webinar. And so if you're not in our system, if you came to the training, you should be in our system and you should be receiving our communications. And if you're not, again, just shoot us an email at theexchange@empathways.org and we can make sure you're in there. And then I know, Carrie, you will get the email for the webinar registration, which will go out. It'll be in our newsletter, and it will also go out a week before the webinar, so you can register then. If you want to blast it out, that's a way to do that as well. But I just wanted to make sure you can all get registered because I think it does sound like a really, really exciting one. That's all I have for the implementation piece. Are there any questions? I know I'm going to hand it over to Angelo in a moment to talk a little more specifically about the bridge.
Not so far. No questions so far.
All right. Well, feel free. We're here. I'm going to hand it over to Angelo then.
So, Carrie, could you skip to the next slide, please?
Yes.
Thank
So
you.
I will just start by saying I sort of I kind of kind of threw this upon you to talk about the housing pillar today, and thank you for having this conversation with us. But just as a little bit of background for you too, Angelo, we were talking about our housing pillar and then comparing it to the impact housing pillar. And what I ended up doing is I sent out both pillars to all mobility mentoring leads, and I asked them for their input. And overwhelmingly, I would say 90% say, keep it here. We like the original. We like the wording of the original. We like the way it's more family friendly with a lot of the ways that we heard people talk about it. But one of the pieces of our housing pillar, it talks about shared housing, and it talks about it being temporarily shared housing. So I wanted to pose this question to you. So if you were working with a family and they came into you and they said, you know, for cultural reasons, and it's just within the way we live, we live with our parents and everyone lives together, and we feel like our housing is very stable. How would you score them on the bridge, or where would you put them on the bridge?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, or just your thoughts on, you know, that shared housing kind of thing. And
yeah, so I'll start by saying that originally in an older version of the Empath Bridge, we did have in our housing subpillar some language that indicated or that stated that participants who were co-housed were not stably housed. And then as a part of when we first put out the bridge to member organizations and they started working with the bridge, you may remember me mentioning this in the training, that some of the immediate feedback was that the language on the bridge was not strengths-based, and it was also very jargony, right? And then another feedback or another concern that came across was around this housing subpillar, and that specific language being, members thought it was a bit problematic because there were a lot of participants who did not think that they were unstably housed, who saw themselves as permanently and stably housed, but were living with family members, right? So because of that, we took that feedback in, we did some thinking, and then we changed the language in our bridge to what it is today. So today you only see language in the housing pillar that says, that indicates whether or not someone is permanently housed, and also meaning if they're living in an emergency shelter or if in temporary housing situations, and also if they have secured stable permanent housing and if it's subsidized or unsubsidized. So we no longer, and as you mentioned, you sent this out, so folks have seen that we no longer have that that co-housing portion in our bridge. With that being said, and with your decision of, or with overwhelmingly the majority of folks wanting to keep the language in the bridge the way it is, I think the bridge can still be used the way it is and spoken about in a way that helps people understand what we mean. And so I'll speak from the perspective of Empath, right? So here at Empath, we as mentors, we don't score people on the bridge, right? And I mean, what I mean by that is the bridge is used as a self-assessment tool. So people will identify themselves where they think they fall under each pillar, right? The housing subpillar is also based on a family's collective income. So if a participant identifies their family as, you know, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandma, and all of those people are living under one house as a family, as long as their collective income as a family is spending less, or as long as them as a family are spending less than 1/3 of their collective household gross income on housing, and they're living without any subsidies, we would score them at the top of the bridge. If a participant is living with family and they consider it permanent housing or a permanent housing situation, then that's what it is, right? It would be a bit different if a participant is temporarily staying with the family, or like maybe couch surfing with family members, or are at risk of becoming homeless at any moment. But as long as they consider themselves safely and permanently housed, they would be scored at the top of the pillar or wherever they feel they fall in under the bridge. Yeah, I don't know if folks have any questions on that.
Yeah, well, I think that really clears it up very clearly. I like that, you know, when it's saying co-housing, that it's very temporary, so that's sort of the I don't know what I want to say, but that's the measure that you're saying, oh, this is permanent. You're not spending over a third of your monthly cost on housing allowance. Then and they probably don't want to set a goal in that area if they're feeling like that's a really stable piece of their life right now, right? So however
Absolutely.
they see themselves on that thing. And, you know, I know that some folks have said, well, what happens if I know they're homeless, but they say, oh, no, we're fine. We're you know, we're okay right now. I think then this is maybe, again, some of that motivational interviewing that you can dig a little deeper and find out, is it really stable? Is it really fine? You know, you're still at risk, and just having some of those deeper conversations. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. So, you know, I mean, that's a little bit of a different situation, right? Like, let's say, for example, and I think it's one of the questions that you posed as well. It's what would happen, or where would we score a family that came in and we knew that they were homeless and living, let's say, in a tent, for example, but they were very happy with that and didn't see it as an issue. So once again, it's a little bit of well, it requires a lot of talking. The reality is, if folks are happy in that specific pillar of their lives and they feel like that's not something they want to work on, us as mentors, it's our job to support them in working on whatever goals make sense for them, right? Two things come into play. So we allow participants are self-assessing. So they are going to assess themselves. This specific family would assess themselves maybe at the very top of the bridge. For our programs here at Empath, we would assess them at the very bottom of the bridge, which says not permanently housed, right? We would have this conversation with participants and explain to them why we're assessing them at the bottom, but we wouldn't change where they self-assessed. If they're comfortable there, that's fine. We would explain that because of them not being permanently housed, we would assess them at the bottom. And when we're inputting that information into our systems, we would actually enter it as both, right? We would enter it as participants self-assessed at the top, and here's a note on why we assess them at the very bottom of the bridge. And this is something that, once again, we would say to participants, right? We're not just entering the notes and not explaining to participants why we're assessing them where we are. But the family, you know, if they're happy, this specific family in the example, if they're happy with their current housing situation, maybe they won't want to set any goals around housing right now, and that's fine. You know, our roles as mentors is to support participants in setting goals that are important and relevant to them at that moment, and to continue to remind them that one pillar of their lives affects the others, right? And with all of that being said, we've also seen that what we've seen is that we don't want to help participants prioritize their goals, because all of the pillars of their lives are interconnected, and these connections will eventually start to surface, right? So the goal is for participants to prioritize goals themselves. And we want to make sure that they're working on goals that feels important to them, because the likelihood of them achieving those goals will be higher if they're working on goals that feel important to them. So I guess, sorry, just to clarify that, I tripped on myself here, but what I was trying to say is, when working with participants, mentors, we want to continue to highlight how, you know, for example, housing might be impacting our health and well-being pillar, or it might be impacting our children's health and well-being pillar if they are living in a tent, for example. But if they don't want to set a goal there at that moment, then that's fine. We'll set goals in other places. But because we know that people's lives are interconnected and no one lives in silos, eventually it's going to come to a point where participants themselves are going to realize that something needs to be done around their housing situation because it's now impacting other parts of their lives. And when they come to that conclusion, it's our job as mentors to support them in now figuring out whatever goals they need to set for themselves around housing. So we continue to empower them and support them in whatever way they're doing. And that means that we are, once again, allowing participants to assess themselves wherever they are, and also keeping note of where we feel like they are and why we feel that way.
Thank you so much. I think that that's great advice. And I love what you said about, even if it's not affecting where they're at right now, talking about the whole picture, right? Then
Yeah.
And how it all of it fits together, then they're going to be motivated to work on a goal that they really choose to work on. So before I let you and Emerald go, I just wanted to give you one more chance to plug the exchange and
Yes.
and maybe talk about some of the resources that folks can find on the exchange.
Totally, yeah. I'm always excited to talk about the portal. I personally feel like it's underused. So in the portal, you will find updates on a variety of different things. So first of all, just let me explain to folks once again. I know Emerald put a plug out there. The portal is it's our online portal. It houses all of the resources that we offer or that members have access to when they join the exchange. All of you would be level 2 members, so you would have full access to the portal. If you don't currently have access to the portal, please email us at theexchange@empathways.org and just give us your first and last name, and we will set you up and get you connected to the portal and get you started. So in the portal, you'll find updates about upcoming webinars, about upcoming events, upcoming trainings, and so on and so forth. Some of the resources that you'll find on there. So as level 2 members, once again, you have full access to the portal. So that means you have access to about 4 years worth of webinar recordings. Those are particularly helpful. I actually go back every once in a while and review them myself because they can be, they're really useful. And so you can watch all of the webinars. You can actually download resources as well that were used in the webinars when they were originally aired. Another resource that you would find in the portal is we have the bridge broken down by pillar, and there are different resources that our mentors use with participants under each bridge pillar. So you can click on one of the pillars and it'll sort of just pop out a few of the resources or a few tools that added tools that our own mentors use with participants for those specific bridge pillars. You'll also find other member adapted tools, other bridges that members have adapted, other goal settings plans that members have adapted. You will find Empath's tools as well on there, and you will also find all of the papers that Beth was talking about. So all of the briefs, the research that has been put out by Empath will be found under resources as well. There's a discussion board where people can pose questions, and other members as well as other folks from Empath will oftentimes answer questions. So it's a great tool when you're stuck on something and you wanna see what people have done. And I would say it's usually a great resource for members, specifically because oftentimes there are questions that come through us and we might not necessarily have the best answer because we don't work with those specific populations. And so when it's posted on the portal, all of the other members have access to it as well. And so they can see the question and hopefully they'll be able to answer it. But there's also a members section of the portal where you can actually get in touch or get information on how to contact the point people for each member organization in the exchange. And if you want a warm introduction to members, you can feel free to email us. You can email me directly if you have my email. If you don't have my email, you can email us at the general theexchange@empathways.org email account. And we can connect you with whatever organizations you're interested in getting to know. Sometimes that can be a little push for other member organizations to answer their emails. We all get piled with emails, so it might get lost. And then the last thing I'll mention is just you can update your profile, so you can add a picture, change your information. But the very useful tool that's on here that I think folks don't always know about is the Career Compass tool, and I'm pretty sure that we sort of test drove the Career Compass tool during the training. So some of you might remember that it's an online database tool that compiles information on a family. So it takes a family's size, location, level of education, and then it sort of spits out a bunch of career options that would put them in track to meeting 60 or 80% of their area median income. So it's a really useful tool for any mentor or any program that's working with people around career and finding jobs and careers that would help them meet a family sustaining wage. And I think that's the last thing I'll mention just for time's sake. But I will gladly take any questions if anyone has anything.
I think the one question, and Natalia, maybe I'm not asking this the right way, but it says, can you please elaborate more on how family support staff or the mentors, how they score or how they assess the family differently than what they self-assess? So, for example, that homeless family, if they are putting themselves higher on the bridge, saying, yeah, it's okay, we're good, we're stable, but knowing that they are, I mean, I can see where the rub is, right? Like, it's hard. Like,
Yes.
It might feel like I'm going against what the family is saying, right?
Totally. Yeah,
Sure,
I think so. So, and once again, I'm speaking from Empath's point of view, right? So at Empath, our mentors will have a conversation with the family and explain, okay, so here's the bridge. This is what this top portion of the bridge is what we at Empath consider to be economic self-sufficiency, right? You're telling me that you're not permanently housed. So by our measurement standards, you would fall down here. With that being said, if you feel like you're permanently housed, if you feel like you're comfortable where you are, that's fine. This is your bridge. This is your tool. And we can work on another area because it's, if you're feeling comfortable, you're feeling like you're at the top here, that's absolutely fine. And I think this is a time when we as it's an uncomfortable conversation to have, right? And I think it's something that comes with time, and I think reflective supervision is really helpful here because being able to brainstorm with your supervisor how to handle the situation to make sure that participants aren't feeling any type of way about the conversations that are being had. Like, we don't want people to feel like we're telling them where they are or whatever it is. So I think using the program or the way that we do it here is we use the program requirements, right? And we explain, well, based on our program requirements, like this is where you fall, and or rather our program measurements, this is where you fall. But however, you're telling me that you're here, then this is where you are, right? So that's one part of it. And I think the other part of it is also understanding that the goal of mobility mentoring is to slowly get people moving forward, right? We're not so concerned if they're saying they're okay, they're okay. We can then set a goal for maybe, under like education attainment, right? And then maybe they'll find that they're not so stably housed once they don't feel like they have a place where they can like study, right? And the whole goal here is to once again build on the participants' executive functioning skills, right? So we're hoping to get them to be able to make all of these decisions because we know they're capable of doing that. And really, we just need to provide them that safe, comfortable space to unwind, to sort of unflip their lids, if y'all remember that from the training. But yeah, to like calm down from those everyday stressors or stresses from that people experience when they're experiencing chronic poverty and homelessness, and be able to like think for themselves, okay, maybe it doesn't actually make sense that my family is homeless and living under a tent. Maybe we could use a little help in the housing pillar, and maybe I want to get us somewhere different. But it does require us to like be patient and supportive of our participants, and I think it's much slower than a lot of us feel comfortable with. I think and I remember someone at the training saying this, we have to take and I can't remember who it was in the back row, the first portion of the training, the Tequila training, but someone said, we have to take off our superhero capes, right? And understand that this is all about supporting the participants, meeting them where they're at.
Yes, I love that. Thank you so much for diving a little bit deeper into that. And I know I've kept you guys here longer than we can. And as more questions come in, don't forget that if we don't get to them today, we're going to include them on the FAQ. But I just want to thank you very much, Angelo and Emerald, for joining us today. It's been really insightful. So thank you very, very much.
My pleasure, and y'all know how to reach us.
Yeah, happy to be
Yeah.
here. Thanks,
Okay.
Carrie.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Great. So I want to move on to our timeline. This was sort of our suggested timeline for that you were given. So hopefully in March we went to the state training. There were implementation plans that we asked you to start thinking about. So in April, we asked you to start thinking about direct service training, and then including the introduction bridge into your application process, putting it in your enrollment packet, that sort of thing. So now we are left in May, and one of our suggestions was to maybe do a second training with staff that goes a little bit deeper into either maybe an ELMS training or SMART goal training. And then as scheduled in May, we have done our webinar today. So we are curious, and we're going to actually do a poll here to see, sort of the first prong of this is how many of the leads out there, how many of you all have provided your agency leadership with an overview of mobility mentoring. So we're going to take just a second to open that poll. And
looks like folks are still responding.
oh, now I understand what you were saying, Kelly, because I'm the presenter, I can't see the poll, right?
Right, yeah. The poll is going, and folks are still responding here. We're about 81% of the group has responded. So give it another 5 seconds. And then I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and then share the responses. So it looks like about 84% have reported yes, that they have provided leadership and overview of mobility mentoring. About 7% say no, and 9% not yet, but it is scheduled.
Great, fantastic. All right, so then the other poll that we have for you guys today is to take a moment, and we just want to see how many of you have actually gone and done direct service. Talked about mobility mentoring with your family support, the folks that are providing direct service to families.
And those responses are coming in. Okay, it looks like we're about there, so I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So it looks like about 61% say yes, they have provided an overview training to direct family service staff. 18% say no, and another 20% say not yet, but it's scheduled.
Great. So that's about 81% of you guys have either scheduled or have already done a direct service training. That's fantastic. So just as a reminder that there are a couple of handouts that are on the webinar today. And two of them are around implementation. So you've seen them before. They were what we had passed out to you all at the training. And I also wanted to just talk a little bit about some of the work that I've been doing and Karen and I have been doing. But when folks are feeling a little stuck and they're not sure where to proceed, or I'm feeling a little like I don't know what I should go with first, just know that I'm available to talk to you. I've talked to not just the mobility mentoring leads, but the directors and other people that that's something we'd like to be able to offer you as just a sounding board to say, do you think this sounds good? Can you help with this area? So please just know you can feel free to reach out to me to help you in that training piece. So the other thing I wanted to talk to you today about too, we've been getting some questions about how does mobility mentoring and the Head Start PFCE sort of crosswalk with each other. And I just wanted to let you know, thankfully from the mobility mentoring exchange, I was able to connect with several Head Starts on the East Coast who are using mobility mentoring as their family partnership agreement, and how they are making this work for their agency. And we also have reached out to Region 10 and talked to them about how this mobility mentoring approach works with the Head Start framework. And I can say that overwhelmingly everybody I talked to was like, yeah, this, of course, it absolutely is in line with the framework. So what we created, and this is another handout as an attachment I'm going to stop for a minute and just ask Kelly. They can see it at the bottom of the gray bar, right, Kelly? It shows them where the handouts are.
Yes, the handouts are on the lower right of your control panel in the webinar there. You click on the little arrow to open up the handouts section, and you will see 5 handouts.
Great, thanks for that clarification. So just really briefly, because you can take a look at this yourself, just want to make sure that you notice that the color bands have no significance. It's really just to show how they are in line with each other. So the sort of peachy area is the Head Start PFCE framework, and then we divided it by domain. So if you look at the family well-being domain, PFCE has indicators of that domain. So then we align that with what domains sort of meet or fulfill that in the bridge. And then when you look at the bridge, exactly what pillars align one by one with that. And then the final column is the assessment. So if the assessment was numbered, which it's not, but if it was, these are the numbers on the questions or the the category on the assessment that is in line with the Head Start PSBE. So there is one exception. The family as lifelong learners really has that school readiness and promoting primary language focus, and so you know from our bridge that we don't really have that 2-gen approach on this bridge, but yet there were still other places you can find that information, either in Teaching Strategies Gold or the Home Language Survey and Teaching Strategies Gold. So that document is for you to use. I know that several
Actually, Carrie, this is Karen. Can I interrupt for just a second and just say that the table that you're sharing is a draft document, that we've had some initial feedback from Region 10 staff, but they're still looking at it, and we haven't had final feedback from them around that. So these are just our ideas at this point, and that once it's finalized, we'll make sure and share it with everyone and let them know.
Do you want to add anything else about Region 10?
No, I mean, we shared this document and 2 other documents that Carrie created with them, and they see a lot of alignment around it. So I feel really positive about it moving forward. It's just not finalized yet, and I just want to be clear about that.
Sure. Okay, so the other piece that I want to just touch base and make sure you guys had a chance to watch it. I looked today at the ELMS webinar, and so far it's already had 150 views on it. So you folks are using it. So that can be another tool that you use in your training, is the step-by-step tutorial on the Mobility Mentoring tab in ELMS. And if you haven't already seen that or watched it, it truly is worth your time. It'll explain a whole lot about what needs to go into ELMS. And then I also wanted to just remind you that if you want a training environment, you just need to email me what needs you think you want to do or want to have in your training environment, and I will work with the data team to get that set up for you. So that's also a possibility for you. One of the documents that is also attached to the handouts is the FAQ. I wanted to point out too that in the FAQ, we had a couple of questions about, well, what's the email address to go to the exchange? That is answered in the FAQ, and the link is actually in the document itself. So that's how you get to the portal. Angelo calls it the portal. I think that's what they call it at Empath. Some of us call it the exchange, but it's all the same. And I also just want to make sure that you all are using Basecamp. If you haven't been using Basecamp, it's a really great way to get some questions answered. It's a great way for me to know what's going on out there and what folks are having a stumbling block on. And just this week, we had some great exchanges on there about receiving college credit for mobility mentoring essentials training. And we talked about what do you do if you have 2 families that are a mom and a dad with 50-50 custody, and how does ELMS handle that dual role? So if you haven't already signed up for that, it's really easy. You just email me. You all should have gotten an email from me, but this was back in March, to invite you to sign up. But if it's buried in your email and you're like, I really need to get on that, just email me. And again, my email is my name. It's Kerry, Kerry, .Beymer, BEYMER, @del.wa.gov. and I'm happy to add you to the Basecamp. Okay, we are at a place where we can look at some questions that you all have. Okay, let's see. Give me a second. So, so Mary, you asked a question about, so we do this differently than what Angela was describing, that they have two different assessment points, and you are correct. There's not built into ELMS that we have where parents put themselves and where we put themselves. Hopefully this is done in conjunction with each other, and you can come up with together where folks should be on the bridge. So you're correct, there is not two different points about that. Let's see, John has a question about mobility mentoring and Child Plus. And I can tell you that I have talked to several folks around the state, and everybody is using that Child Plus system so differently that I really can't answer a general question about how folks have put it, how they have put the bridge and Child Plus together. I think that's a really great example of setting up a call with me, because then I can get more information. What I do know is that no two people have been doing it alike. So what tools that you've been using and how can we incorporate it is a really great opportunity for us to do some one-on-one looking at your system versus a blanket, this is how it works. So I hope you give me a call, John, and we'll set up a call. Let's see, there was another question about can individual family sports have the training environment now to practice in before the fall? So again, that was from Unity. Unity, just give me a call or email me exactly what you're looking for, and I'll see if the data team can accommodate what you're needing. Again, I just want to let you know what the handouts are. There is a bridge as one of the handouts, and I want you to just know that I've seen a couple of times a bridge that it still says pilot on it. So we're trying to clean up as much as we can and making sure that it does all of the language that was using pilot has been removed. So this is the most up-to-date bridge. It's a clean version, so if any of you still have that floating around a bridge that you've used, especially some of you folks that have been in the pilot, this is one with all of that language removed. So feel free to use that. We also have the planning tools, and then the frequently asked questions, and the links again to the exchange and to how do you get on Basecamp are in those frequently asked questions. So as a couple more questions come in, so Nancy said she noticed the word help on the bottom third level. Oh, I thought I caught that, but thank you, Nancy. So let me clean that up, and I will post a clean version on Basecamp, so hopefully you're on there. Okay, well, I think that about wraps it up for today. Thank you so much. I hope you were as inspired as I was listening to Elizabeth Babcock talk about this work that we're all doing and sort of the national perspective and how it all fits together. It's pretty incredible to think about moving this work forward, and super excited to be on this journey with all of you. And if we didn't get to any questions today that I might have missed, I will make sure we get those on the frequently asked questions. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. I don't know if Karen's still on the line, if she wanted to say any closing words. Maybe not. Okay,
So
well, thank you.
This is Karen, and I'm outside. There's a truck that's just about to go by, so I know it's going to be loud here for a second. But I just want to thank everyone for your efforts. Really, the efforts, I want to have a special, grateful thanks to everyone who participated in the pilot. All the work, all that you did really has been foundational for what we have set up, and it has made it really much easier and better for your peers who are now implementing. I also want to thank everyone who has participated in the pilot and stepped up and said that they'll help neighbors who are just beginning to implement this with any questions or supports that they may need. I really appreciate that collaborative and that community perspective. And I want to also thank everyone who is taking this on and that went back to your leadership and met with them and talked about it and then started making plans and have already trained staff. We've had lots of really positive feedback around staff input around this, and we have also had some great conversations with the ways that staff are blending what they have already been doing in practice and how they're going to build the mobility mentoring approach into that. And we're hoping and planning on sharing more of those types of details with you on the next webinar when we're all together. I'm so sorry that I was scheduled to be someplace else today and that I've not been able to be as attentive and involved in the call as I usually am, and really appreciate everyone's patience and understanding with that, and look forward to connecting with all of you next time we meet.
I will be sending out a June date. You can look for it in the next week when we have that webinar scheduled. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today.